This conference will now be recorded.
2 o'clock, I'd like to call a special meeting of the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee to order. Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Certainly. Mr. Measy.
Here.
Mr. Grega.
Here.
Mr. DePonte.
Here.
Mrs. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Schofield.
Here.
Mr. Sikorsky. Mr. Zanter.
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum present and 2 remote. If I could ask for a motion to allow Mr. DePonte and Mr. Measy to attend remotely and vote remotely at this meeting.
I'll make a motion that they are officially attending the meeting. Second.
Second. Okay, I'll call the vote. Mr. Measy,
Yes?
Mr. Grega,
Yes.
Mr. DePonte,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Schofield,
Yes.
Mr. Zanter.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay. I think we're ready to move on into the meat of the meeting. Do we have Tony Piers online?
I do not see Tony online. I see Mr. Lombardo is online with the firm.
Good afternoon. Let me check on Tony and I'll be right back.
Okay. It seems to me that we've got 2 issues that are not exactly construction issues, but have to do with legal contractual issues that we need to clear out of the way and then get down to the contracts themselves. I hope everybody kind of agrees to that.
Yes.
And the 2 issues are the fact that Manhattan Road and Bridges subcontractor Spectrum is qualifying their contractor license, and the other one is that there was a bid modification by Marine Contracting Group. And I'd like to clear those 2 items away so that we can get down to the meat of what the contracts are. And to start off, I'd like to understand, and maybe our attorney can tell us this, the fact that Spectrum is qualifying their contractor license, does that disqualify them from the bid in any way?
You're muted, Tony.
Go ahead, Chris.
It's Tony.
Tony?
Tony,
You're muted, Tony.
You're muted, Tony. We can't hear you.
Okay, here I am. I'm sorry. I would suggest that Mr. Foster first make his presentation
Okay.
as to the bid submittals, and then he can address his memorandum, and then we will provide our legal opinion as outlined in the memorandum as to the actions the committee may want to take in making recommendations to the board.
Okay. Mr. Foster, if you would go forward and make your presentation. Hello? Is he with us?
You guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mazy. I agree with you. There is some issues that the 2 main issues that you were describing. For the record, my name is Joe Foster. I'm engineer of record for this project. And step back and just go over some of the brief view of what was presented, to the contractors. Let me just step back in time a little bit. Back in November, I prepared a bid package, and it was made available through DemandStar and advertised through the news press. The documents included general conditions, technical specifications, the bid schedule, and the plans. A mandatory pre-bid conference was held on December 3rd. The 3 responsive bidders that I'll be going over in a little bit did attend that meeting. 2 addendums were issued clarifying technical issues. all three bidders responded those addendums. On December 22nd, three bids were obtained. Manhattan Road and Bridge was low bid at roughly $901,000. Marine Contracting Group was at $995,000. Stokes Marine was at 1.1 mil. The difference between the highest and low was roughly about 17%. My did review the packages, and we did notice that the Manhattan Bridge had their subcontractor, who is the Manhattan Bridge is the prime, had their subcontractor qualify their license, and I'm not positive how to describe that. I'm not an attorney. I would default to your counsel for that. We did send out a memo also to clarify the bids of what type of material. Basically, all the contractors are using the same piles and the framing. The one issue is the deck. Manhattan Marine Contracting Group identified 5-quarter. Stokes Marine identified 2-inch decking. The difference, we went through an analysis, kind of looked through because to try to just figure out what's going on with the bids, and we found out that the 5-quarter decking is about $50,000 more than the 2 decking. Now, structurally, both are satisfactory. They meet the 80 pounds per square foot live load, so I take no issue with that. However, when the bridges were completed last year, they used a 2-inch tandem board, and that's what Stokes Marine is proposing to do. There was a bit of a hiccup with Marine Contracting Group that when they did send that memo to me identifying the board or the material they were going to use, there appeared to have been a mistake on their end that they scheduled 5-quarter, but it was they sent a memo later on. Now again, this is a contractual, and this is where it gets out of my bailiwick here to as far as at my scope, and that's why I defer to Tony on those two main issues.
Well, okay. I don't make recommendations as to what entity to award a bid to. You have Mr. Foster, sub-consultant to Tetra Tech, to make recommendations to the committee and ultimately to the board. And in reviewing the materials, I guess just a couple of facts. I outlined in my memorandum highlights and excerpts from the bid materials as to what is required to be provided. And the committee at the first instance needs to make a determination as to whether or not all the bids are responsive bids or whether any of the bids should be rejected as not being responsive. And the committee can take into account whether or not documents required by the bids were material and were or were not provided. That is why in our memorandum, if you note, one of the first items we mentioned was with regards to Article 3 in the instructions to bidder, and also specifically addressing Article 3.2 as to qualifications of bidders. And then also Article 16, various page, Article 19, and Article 1.4 of the bid form. And I guess the question I have for Mr. Foster, did Manhattan's bid state that Spectrum is to be the qualifier?
Can you repeat that question?
Did Manhattan's bid state that Spectrum is the qualifier?
It had for licensure, it had the bidder and it had Spectrum underneath the bidder for their bidder licensure had Spectrum, and I believe
Okay,
you.
no, the question was, did Manhattan's bid state that Spectrum was the qualifier?
No, in my opinion, stated.
I'm sorry?
No, it was not. In my opinion, it was not stated that way.
Okay. In members committee, I think what's important, if you look at Article 3.2, and again, the board can ask Mr. Foster questions as to the various bids, whether or not the information in Article 3.2 was provided as required. And that's something the board can make inquiries about. And the committee can also make inquiries of Mr. Foster with regards to the issue and the evaluation of bids. And the question is in Article 3.2. If you look at the specific requirements in Article 3.2, we start that analysis on our memo at pages 3 and 4 as to what the bid instructions indicated for qualification requirements. So, and again, our memos provides an outline, so hopefully you all have read it, that our opinion, if Mr. Foster advises PPAC that Manhattan's bid did not provide evidence that he or she is licensed to provide general construction services in the state of Florida as described per the construction plans or in the work description, or that Manhattan did not provide verifiable proof of a minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor under the same name as listed in specification section 00300 bid form, PPAC may take those factors into account in making its recommendations. Then we have 3 other paragraphs about our opinions as to the course of conduct that PPAC can make. So those are inquiries and discussions that PPAC needs to have with Mr. Foster as far as those factual questions that have been raised. That's as to the first legal issue. And then there is the second legal issue with regards to any modification to a bid. The bid documents specifically say modification after bids are open, corrections or modifications to bids are not permitted. So the board committee can ask questions of Mr. Foster and make a determination as to whether or not PPAC believes that what the email that was sent by Mr. Modolo constitutes a modification. So I mean, those are the factual determinations and inquiries that the committee can make, and I've given our legal advice based upon whatever factual determinations the committee can make. And if the committee feels that the bid specifications were not complied with and that the bid is not responsive for failing to provide required documents, then the committee can make that recommendation as to one or all of the bidders that the committee does not feel met the criteria or comply with the bid requirements. That's part of the committee's analysis. That's my work. My job is not to make a recommendation. Zach, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, sir.
Well, Tony, I guess the question I would have is, this kind of places us in a position of making kind of a legal call, doesn't it? In other words, is it permissible on our part to say, okay, we see that there were these, I don't know what I'll call them, glitches in the contract submissions, but that we're not bothered by them, and we consider them to be essentially the bids to be essentially good.
Well, the committee looking at the bid documents, okay, as I mentioned, Article 3.2
Yeah.
states as to what the bidder shall provide, which is mandatory. And the question is, did Manhattan provide evidence that he or she is licensed to provide the bidder? He or she is licensed to provide general construction services in the state of Florida. That's a question that the committee needs to answer. And that did Manhattan provide verifiable proof of a minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor? The bidder is Manhattan Road and Bridge, as per the bid document. I mean, the bid document was not, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Foster, that the bid document was not submitted by Spectrum, it was submitted by Manhattan, correct?
That is correct.
And the question is, I mean, if the committee is of the belief that the failure to provide required documents to show that they are licensed to do the work and a verifiable proof of minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor under the same name as listed in the specification to bid form, the committee has the ability to say that's an irregularity, but in our opinion, it's a material irregularity. if the committee can disagree with our opinion, ours is legal advice. But the question becomes from the committee to make a determination, is Manhattan able to pull the permits as a general contractor? They do not provide evidence of same. That's, again, the committee analyze all these factors and make those recommendations. You saw the choices that they have. That the committee, at the paragraph, middle paragraph, page 5 of the memo, we're just repeating our opinion that PPAC determines that Manhattan's bid did not provide the verifiable proof of a minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor. Then PPAC has the discretion to determine that this failure to provide is neither a minor informality, not involving price, term, or changes in the work, nor minor variations to specifications, informalities, irregularities, and technicalities. Or the PPAC has the ability to say it is a minor one, but again, the PPAC's decision cannot be arbitrary and capricious in making the recommendation.
But what I'm hearing you saying, it is not minor.
Well, the courts ultimately determine what's minor or not minor, but the committee, I mean, I guess the question for the committee is, Mr. Measy, I'm not the decision maker. And so I provide guidance. And so the committee needs to discuss amongst itself whether it believes the bidder, Manhattan, complied with the bid instructions and submitted a responsive bid. And in evaluating whether Manhattan provided a responsive bid, they need to look at the requirements of the bid documents. And again, the decision can't be, it has to be a basis for the decision, it can't be arbitrary and capricious. And if the committee is going to say it's a minor irregularity, I think they need to discuss why it's a minor irregularity. And if Mr. Foster can articulate if it, in his opinion, whether it's minor or not, or the question is, can Manhattan pull the license, pull a permit, I mean, to do the work? And that's not been answered. I'm not a contracting agency. I'm not the permitting agency for the city of Fort Myers.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I'd like to get people's comments on this.
And also any of the members of the public, I think you know, Mr. Measy, that if there are the vendors that are there, they can, after the committee talks amongst itself, then they are free to make statements or presentations and ask questions of Mr. Foster also, through the chair.
And Mr. Foster, did Manhattan provide verifiable information that they've been licensed for the last 5 years in Florida?
I with all due respect, Mr. And I want to answer that question. I think this is like, we're very gray here for what it is. And I think I want to just boil this question down to, and if you can answer this, Mr. President, really help me formulate. Can a subcontractor qualify the bid?
And
Mr. Foster, the question that was asked is, did the bidder, who's Manhattan, provide the verifiable proof? That was the question that was asked. Is that correct, ma'am?
Yes.
They provided verifiable proof that they have worked on projects over the past 5 years. But
Well, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, the bid instructions say verifiable proof of a minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor under the same name as listed in specification section 00300 bid form, which is Manhattan, what is it, name bridge.
It's not, but it's not licensure. That's key. There's the is yes, the licensure is different, and that's where we're into this gray area of licensure versus name.
No, Mr. Foster. The question was, the Manhattan Road and Bridge, as the bidder, provide verifiable proof of a minimum of 5 consecutive years as a state of Florida licensed contractor under the name Manhattan Road and Bridge Company?
Yes.
they did?
Not under the licensure though. That's where, guys, with all due respect, I'm an engineer. This seems to be a contractual issue, and I agree with Mr. Meze that, this is outside of my expertise. We're going down into the contractual language, and this is outside of I don't feel comfortable making these opinions, professional opinions.
Mr. Foster, with all due respect, the bid instruction said in Article 3.2, the bidder, and you agree the bidder is Manhattan Road and Bridge, correct? And top of the line.
I recluse myself from this question. I'm not going to answer.
Mr. Foster, doesn't the top of page 00300-5 of the bid form submitted by Manhattan Road and Bridge under the line bidder indicate correct name of bidding entity? Does it not say Manhattan Road and Bridge Company?
It's Manhattan Road and Bridge, correct.
Okay. And Article 3.2, members of the committee, I'm just not providing opinion, this is a fact. 3.2 says the bidder must provide evidence that he or she is licensed to provide general construction services in the state of Florida as described for the construction plans under work description. So Mr. Foster, did the bidder provide that evidence?
No.
Okay.
No, that's what I'm hearing. And it sounds to me, Teresa, you may want to go forward. Go ahead.
I believe that these folks have not met the requirements that were stipulated they needed to do. They have a subcontractor that has done work for 5 years, but not under an acceptable licensing situation. Therefore, they don't meet the bid requirements.
Other comments on that? Teresa, you were pursuing a line of questioning.
I agree with what Joe said. What concerns me is if we accept their bid and then they default in some way, that we may not be able to hold them liable because we allowed their bid outside of the bidding instructions.
I agree with that. And suppose somebody gets on that deck and we have an unlicensed contractor that did the work, we might be liable.
Yeah, and again, members of the committee, so I think one question's been answered. And if you recall our memorandum at page 5, we also discussed another portion of the bid documents that provided information with regards to if the primary qualifying agent is not the owner, an officer, partner, member, a joint venture, managing partner, the bidder will be required to describe the relationship to the company and provide verifiable evidence of such relationship and or license use agreement. And I guess the question to Mr. Foster is, did Manhattan provide relationship to Spectrum and provide verifiable evidence of the relationship and or license use agreement?
No.
Yeah, it seems to me that I agree with Joe and Teresa, and I'd like to have the other members chime in on this, but I don't think we should go down this road. I think it's too dangerous. We've got this really questionable situation, which our attorney has advised us is something that they're concerned about, and I think we should disqualify this bidder.
I agree. I have a couple of technical questions to ask Mr. Foster.
Sure, go ahead, John.
All right, as a engineering consulting firm, you get a lot of bids from a lot of different contractors. Have you worked with this firm before?
Manhattan Road and Bridge?
Yes.
I have not worked with them before.
They have a decent reputation in the field for this type of work. I mean, why did we go out to bid, request them to submit a bid if we did not have qualifications or know them as a qualified bidder? I mean, I'm not big on paperwork, and there can be little discrepancies on the wording of how a contract, et cetera, et cetera. The big question is the contractor himself. is he a reliable, very good contractor? We're talking a fair amount of money if we do not accept his bid. And I'm fine with not accepting his bid if the low bidder isn't qualified.
Yeah, John, I agree with you that that's what we want to do is clear away this stuff. So we're looking at,
Phil, let's not
Well-
discuss the paperwork issue right now. Let's just discuss the contractor. So I think the general, I mean, as a consulting firm, he has to know these contractors or he would not have gone out to bid. So Mr. Foster, I mean, how well do we know this contractor? Does he have a good reputation? And does he do good qualified work?
Yeah, I think the question is, how were these prospective companies picked to get a bid?
They weren't picked. It was a public notice.
Okay.
You're on the wrong route there.
Bidding
Oh,
process.
okay, okay.
Anybody can put it in. It's a public solicitation.
exactly. So we got 3 bids in a public solicitation. We didn't necessarily go out and find these companies.
Okay, that answers the question.
Well, I still haven't had an answer from Mr. Foster on this particular firm. I mean, does anybody have any feelings of?
I know Manhattan Bridge. It is very atypical, I would say, to have a subcontractor qualify the bid. I've never seen it before. I'll just leave it.
Wait, say that again?
I've heard of Manhattan Bridge, Road and Bridge. It's odd. It's not typical for them to have their subcontractor qualify their bid. That would raise flags. That's why I brought it to your attention.
Okay.
Are there any people, John, how do other people feel about this? I keep coming down to some of the comments that both Teresa and Joe made, that I don't think we want to get mixed up in this. We've got 2 other apparently qualified bidders. So I don't know that we want to do this. There are risks involved, and I, for one, would vote against taking the risk.
Mr. Measy?
Yes.
What I would suggest is, after the committee has its initial discussion and before it takes any action, is on this question. So I guess the threshold question is whether the committee will make a recommendation to reject Manhattan's bid as not being a responsive bid and not being responsive and responsible bid, and for the issues that we've discussed. And so, and I think that's sort of the first threshold question, and you guys have hit on it, in whether or not there are any people that want to speak on that topic before the committee takes action on that issue.
Tony, I have another question. Let's assume we disqualify his bid. Can he take legal action?
Okay, what you're doing, you're making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to reject the bid as not being responsive and not being a qualified bidder. Anybody can litigate anything. You can always ask the Board of Supervisors when it goes to them to come up with a contrary opinion, and whether the person wants to litigate after that, we can never stop them from doing that.
Can he delay our construction?
Well, that happens in the bidding context quite often. I mean, whether or not somebody is going to challenge the recommendation, I don't think is an appropriate consideration. You need to look at the materials that were submitted, the recommendation, the memorandum from Mr. Foster, and our legal advice.
Can we make a motion then that Manhattan Road and Bridge, we would not recommend them to the CDD because in our opinion, they do not meet the bid requirements, particularly pertaining to licensing?
Yeah, the committee can make that recommendation or I'll have a motion to that effect and then have a discussion, but I would suggest that before the committee does that the committee ask if there are any members of the public that wish to comment on this or anybody in attendance.
Okay. I will ask, are there any members of the public or other people in attendance who have an opinion on this?
Phil, we do have a visitor here. I don't know, the gentleman sitting out there, I've been wondering who he's representing, so maybe. Okay, thank you. So
I
we have,
didn't hear,
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
I couldn't hear it. Joe, would you repeat what he said?
thank you.
What did he say? If we could, yeah, put it on the
What did he
record.
say?
At Road and Bridge Company.
What did he say? Can someone, we can't hear remotely. Can someone who is in the rooms
Bridge
repeat
Company.
what he said?
Go ahead now.
James Land with Manhattan Road and Bridge Company.
Okay. Mr. Land, do you have any comments that you would like to make in this?
Yes, sir. The first comment is when I looked at this project at bidding, I contacted Mr. Shoemaker and posed this question I had with my GC license. My qualifier retired due to COVID. It has taken a little bit longer to get my license of the new qualifier, which the gentleman from Spectrum Contracting is a sister company of ours. We own multiple companies. We own 7 companies to be exact. And the gentleman that's going to qualify us, I'm waiting on his license to actually come in that says he qualifies Manhattan Road and Bridge. That's why I questioned and asked the question prior to bidding if that was going to be an issue for my subcontractor, who is a sister company of mine, be my qualifier due to the COVID licensing restrictions that I'm waiting on them to come in.
But as of this moment, Mr. Land, your company is not licensed because Spectrum hasn't been able to obtain that.
Spectrum is licensed.
Okay.
I provided his certificate in with the bid package. That's a licensed general contractor. And I stated in the bid package that he was a subcontractor. They were going to qualify Manhattan's license and provide for the project.
So it's Manhattan that doesn't have the license.
Correct.
I thought it
Spectrum
was,
has
I
the
thought it was
license.
a subcontract.
No, Spectrum has the license.
Mr. Land, did you put that question in writing to Mr. Foster?
No, I spoke verbally over the phone to Mr. Shoemaker.
Did you put that question in at the pre-bid, mandatory pre-bid meeting?
No, I do not believe so.
Okay.
Further comments from the members of the committee?
Well, Mr. Measy, I would
Right.
ask, since this is a hybrid remote kind of meeting, Chris, has anyone sent any faxes, emails, texts, or anything into the committee on this topic or asked to speak?
No, we've not received any requests to speak or any chat requests online.
Okay, thank you.
I think Mr. Land has given us some good information. Unfortunately, I also still think that we have a licensing issue here. And as I understand, Tony, we're really required to follow some legalities here, and licensing is one of those. I think maybe there's some misunderstandings, but it's still the issue. We don't have a license.
Any other comments by the committee? Do we have a motion to disqualify?
Mr. Chairman,
It'd be to, yeah, deem to disqualify the bid by Manhattan Road and Bridge.
Bridge. Do we have a motion? Do I hear a motion for that?
yes, I make a motion that we reject.
Recommend. It'd be
bid.
recommendation, I apologize. It'd be recommendation of the Board of Supervisors.
Board.
I apologize.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. That we recommend to the Board of Supervisors to reject Manhattan's bid based upon it being non-responsive to the bid instructions and no licensure.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Do we have any comments?
I'd like to ask the contractor here his opinion of this particular motion. I mean, well, seriously, I mean, look, you're a very large contractor. Now, is $1 million a big contract for you? Or is it something like, hey, it's
No,
not a
sir.
big-
I just turned in a bid for $26 million today to Lee County.
so you can
Yeah.
care,
Yeah.
easy question. You could care less about the contract.
Well, no, John, they obviously cared. They sent somebody to this meeting, but I don't think that's, I don't think that's relevant.
Yeah.
Are there other comments?
Yeah, Glenn, Mr. Chairman, Glenn. Um,
Yep.
It was interesting to hear what he said that they're trying to qualify. Don't you think we should give them a little more time to meet that qualification before we do this motion to disqualify them?
I
I
don't,
don't know if we have that option.
I don't think we do.
I
Tony,
mean, I can provide my business license that shows I'm a general contractor with Lee County from 2015 when we established in Florida.
The question, okay, I go back to the bid documents. In essence, if the committee makes a recommendation to waive that requirement pending at whatever point in time, we don't know when, there will be a new qualifier approved by the licensing entities for Manhattan to be a general contractor, then that you make a recommendation to waive the requirement that provide evidence that they are licensed to provide general construction services in the state of Florida, as described in the plans and/or work description. And to the point where Mr. Land asserted that he had a conversation with Mr. Shoemaker, the pre-bid conference language in the bid documents, Article 6 says, oral statements may not be relied upon and will not be binding or legally effective. Subsequent written questions must be submitted by email to the owner at Chris Shoemaker at gatewaydistrict.org.
Did I?
yeah,
Tony, I'd be concerned that this is a special meeting to expedite this process to get it started. And having written lots of specifications in my life to qualify or perhaps disqualify somebody, dotting I's and crossing T's is critical in this situation. And for whatever reason, the I's aren't dotted, the T's aren't crossed. And I think we're here to make some decisions today and move forward. And I appreciate Mr. Land taking the time to be here and explain. I think he's given us information that we somehow didn't have, but I still believe at the end of the day, the I's aren't dotted, the T's aren't crossed. And I don't know what kind of delays we might be faced with if we start a different process. And I don't know how fair that is to the other bidders either, if there's a legal issue with that.
I want to go back and check my emails. I do believe, I know I spoke on the phone with Mr. Shoemaker, but I do believe I did send some kind of email in reference to the license.
Chris, I also have a question. Is the language that you put in this bid package typical?
It's very standard for a state GC. And I remember that conversation because you were asking me about a subcontractor of that. And I said, the bid specifications state you must be a licensed general contractor. And I think I referred that back to the engineer reviewing it, but I did not say in any way, shape, or form that it was okay to have a subcontractor with that license qualify the bid, because I just wouldn't make a statement like that, or because I'm not reviewing the bids or making the recommendations. And I do remember clearly I said the bid specifications state it requires a GC license. State of Florida, not Lee County.
So it's the state of Florida that requires that.
Well, it's the state of Florida general contractor's license, not licensed to do construction in Lee County. It's a different, okay, license.
where I'm coming from is somewhat where Joe is, but even a little broader, and that is we have two other qualified bidders. Why do we want to possibly hang ourselves up on this bid? Admittedly, it'll save us some bucks, but I think it's not wise for us to get ourselves hung up on this particular bid. I think we should reject it, as the motion said. Couple of you we haven't heard from. Ron, you any thoughts on this?
We should reject the bid.
Okay. Doug, where do you come out?
I think we should reject the recommendation for this bid, yes.
And Glenn, are you there also?
No, I don't think we should.
Okay. Are there any further comments people would like to make before we take a vote? I'd like to move this along. Hearing none, I'll call the vote.
Okay, the motion is to reject the bid of
Is to
Manhattan.
reject the bid. That's correct.
Okay, I'll call Mr. Measy,
Yes.
Mr. Grega,
I'm going to abstain for right now, but I'll vote by the end.
Okay, it's not abstaining. You're going to hold off to the end, Mr. Greger.
Well, my concern is,
Let's continue the vote.
wait, a
No.
minute, I have another question though. We have a representative from the CDD here, is that correct? Okay,
okay, Mr. DePonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Schofield,
Yes.
Mr. Sikorsky,
No.
Mr. Zanter.
yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Mr. Greger, what was his vote?
Greg, are you going to vote?
I just feel sorry for some of these contractors. I worked with a lot of contractors regarding generals, subs, etc. Language sometimes is the fault of the person sending out the bid.
Yeah. John, how do you vote?
Did you say no or?
Yeah, discussion's over.
All right, discussion's over. I'll
Yes.
abstain as a result.
You can't abstain, Mr. Greger.
I've really spent a lot of time reading all these documents, and I think they were fairly plain.
I think the discussion is over. Yes, there may have been problems with the documents, but we're now moving on. John,
Phil, John has to vote yes.
Yes or no? Mr. Greg?
I can't, why,
You can't abstain. Yeah.
I can't abstain?
No, the only time you can abstain from voting in the state of Florida is if you have a voting conflict of interest under the statute.
I can almost say that.
But it has to be you can't just say, John, Mr. Greger, you have to have one that's recognized under Florida law.
Well, Tony, let's assume that I had worked with, never mind. Yeah.
John, how do you vote?
I will agree and vote yes.
Yes, okay. The motion carries. Okay. Now, let's move on to the other issue that I think we've got here, and that is that Manhattan Contracting Group modified the bid.
No, that's Marine. I'm
Marine.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Marine Contracting Group. Tony, do you have any comments on that before we go to committee discussion?
No, other than the memo had a brief discussion about that it referenced the language in the bid documents and attached it exhibit C to the memo that says after bids are open, corrections or modifications are not permitted. And again, to the extent that it constitutes a modification of the bid, it's not permitted. And I guess if you want to hear from Mr. Modolo or Mr. Foster how they construe the email that was sent by Mr. Modolo.
I'm present on the phone. This is Mr. Brian Modolo, if the board would like to hear from me.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Modolo.
Thank you for your time and consideration. Marine Contracting Group responded in how it looked at the sequence of events. We presented the bid, we presented the bid properly, and I don't think there's any dispute about that. We were asked post-bid, meaning after the bid was submitted by Mr. Foster, to clarify. I think he asked all of the bidders to clarify what materials they supplied. I think it's important to note that both a 2x6 material and a 5/4 material for decking was allowed and specified through the bid process, and Mr. Foster, I think, would agree with that either was allowed. He stated that earlier. Having said that, when we filled out the questionnaire, we sent it back to Mr. Foster, identifying 5-quarter board as the decking. That is incorrect. We in our bid, without any modification, bid 2x6 decking, wear deck. I provided in that infamous email that I sent a dated bid from our supplier to show factually that we weren't making anything up, that we had to bid for the 2x6. And it was an error in administration in answering the questionnaire. So we didn't look at it as a bid modification. We looked at it as a correction of a post-bid questionnaire. So I didn't look at it at all, and I'm not a lawyer, and I will refer to the board's wisdom as to how they would look at this. But I looked at it as simply trying to correct a mistake that had been made on a post-bid questionnaire to clarify our materials, and I wanted to clarify it properly. In listening to this process today, it also occurs to me that we shouldn't be penalized because both 5-quarter and 2x6 were allowed, and regardless of one is cheaper than the other, it shouldn't be I guess a comparison should be made, but in either case we shouldn't be penalized. But the facts is that if we were chosen to put this deck in for you, this boardwalk, and do these repairs, that we would be supplying 2x6 wear deck. And that was the clarification I was trying to make that was incorrectly made to Mr. Foster after the bids were submitted. We didn't try to modify. We didn't look at that as a modification again, not to belabor the point. We looked at it as a correction of a submittal for post-bid information.
Let me just,
I have one question. Did your original bid include the state the 2x6 and you meant the 5?
The bid documents the bid sheet didn't have, it just had a lump sum for decking. It didn't identify it as 5-quarter or 2x6. I believe that's why the post-bid clarification was sent out. Because on your bid submittal sheet, it doesn't ask whether it's 5-quarter or 2x6, to the best of my knowledge.
and
I know.
did your change, Mr. Madolo, change your bid, the total bid price?
Absolutely not. The total bid price remains the same, and we were only stating through my email that to clarify to you all, we were including 2x6 wear decks, which, by the way, is today's market. Composite decking is extremely difficult to get. Right now, the wear deck is much more available than Tantic. In our experience.
Your bid actually is you're bidding 2x6 material manufactured by Wear Deck.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And is that material less expensive or more expensive than the Tandeck?
I believe they're pretty comparable, but I could get quotes. It also depends what supplier you go to, but all composite is pretty expensive, but they're comparable.
Are they comparable? Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions of Mr. Madolo?
Yeah, I have one question. The 5x4, I think, is about 1.05 inches thick, and the 2x6 is roughly 2 inches thick. 1 point.
What is it?
2 inches, not 2 inches.
Yeah, it's a 2-inch nominal, so it's one and a half. Is it about a 1.5 inch?
It's a little more than 1.5.
Yeah, a little bit more than 1.5. They actually measure it. They don't measure it in imperial, but I can submit that information to you. But it's standard size for all 2x6 composite decking. Everyone refers to it as 2x6, just like finished lumber. But there is a slight difference. I think it's not quite 1 3/4, probably more like 1 5/8.
Okay, just for my other edification, what's the centers you've planned on for that? 16 or 24 inches?
24 aspect.
It's all 24 aspect.
Thank you.
Both the wear deck 5-quarter and 2x6, but we're using 2x6, can go to a 24-inch span.
Yeah, I had read that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions for him. Nowhere in your bid does it specify 5 quarters, correct? Isn't that what I heard you say?
What I said was we supplied you all the information that was on the bid submittal sheet. And my recollection, and I think it's in front of me, do we have it? It's not on the bid sheet. It doesn't specify what size, nor was it at. It just said decking lump sum. So nowhere, so in the bid specs, it says you can use 2/6 or 5 quarter, but on your submittal sheet with pricing, there is no indicator.
Okay, so you didn't specify in there 5 or 2 inch. Okay.
Correct. That's why I didn't think of it as a modification when I corrected what I read in Mr. Foster's review. I just wanted to clarify, no, we supplied 2x6, not 5 quarter. It was a mistake in our submittal of this post request information.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, would you consider that a clarification and not a change? I would.
Yeah, the committee also has the ability to determine it's a clarification and a minor irregularity that was clarified. I think they have that discretion.
This is Joe Foster. For clarification purposes, there, the 5 quarter wear deck or equal was specified in the plans. So the marine contracting group did meet the minimum specifications. They're providing a different equal that meets minimum design specifications.
Is there anyone who thinks that this is not a minor change?
Is Stokes Marine allowed to comment on that?
Yes.
This is Brent Stokes, owner of Stokes Marine, for the record. Listen, I'm going to be the first to admit before I make my comment that I look out of biased glasses. I'm obviously making this comment on the best behalf of my outfit. And it's no disrespect to Marine Contracting Group. We bid against those guys on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, I think it's interesting that Ryan's clarification, if it wants to be called that, comes after it was already addressed in an email from Joe, and it comes after Joe's memo and Joe's thoughts on the closeness and proximity of our bids is noted. 5 quarter and 2x, he knows well as I do, there's a significant price difference between a 2x board and a 5 quarter board. And in my opinion, that's not something you clerically miss. There's a substantial price difference in there. So I can't help but suggest, I hate to even say this really, but I can't help but suggest that it's him changing his price once the cards are on the table and once the memo comes out from the engineer outlining the closest in proximity. Now, I realize it still has him as lower than us, but there's about a $50,000 difference. As Joe outlines in his summary, I priced it with my vendor to confirm that number, and it is accurate. So it looks like roughly $100,000 difference between the two of us, me having 2x and him having 1x, brings the difference in half, which now makes it a pretty small percentage. I'll note that he is still less, but sure, if I can change my bid after the fact, once I see the memo from the engineer and I can disguise it as a clarification and take some dollars out of it to make myself more competitive, I'd surely do so. So, I just think I think that consideration has to be given.
I'd like to address that. This is Brian with Marine Contracting, if I could.
Can I ask a question first, please? As I understand, the Marine Contracting Group has quoted a 2x6 material, which is 1.5 inches thick. And as I recall, looking at the Stokes quote, they were also quoting the 2-inch by 6 material, which is the same name. 2x6 material would have the same thickness. Am I correct that both of you now have 2x6 material in your quotes?
His original price was 5 quarter. That's what he responded to the engineer of record saying, clarifying after the fact.
That is not a fact. And
Mr. Measy, I would suggest that you have, first of all, the speakers speak one at a time and direct their answers to the chair, and not have a debate amongst themselves.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Stokes, let's have you first.
when I looked at the quotes that came in, I did not see anything but decking listed on that form, and no thickness or material. So I'm naive to, if Stokes specified what material it was versus if the other company, Marine, didn't specify or did specify material. Did you both specify a material in the bid that you submitted?
Mr. Stokes, would you answer that, please, for your company?
No, sir, we did not specify a decking in the bid submittal. We specified the decking that we chose in Mr. Foster's post-bid follow-up questions to clarify. As Marine Contracting Group Representative answered earlier, there was not a spot in the original bid submittal form where the bidder would indicate which decking they chose, and the specs did have options for a couple different options there. So where we specified that was in the follow-up questions from Mr. Foster after the fact. At that point, I specified that I was using 2x, and at that point, Marine Contracting Group specified that they were using 5/4. They later sent an email saying that that was a mistake after Joe's memo was put out outlining the price difference between the 2x and the 1x.
Mr. Mandolo, would you
Yeah.
address
Yeah,
that question?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. As Stokes Marine has stated, there was no requirement on the bid submittal form. On our questionnaire, we incorrectly marked it as 5/4. I did change it. I did clarify that it was my email that clarified, Brian Mandolo, that it clarified that it was 2x6. And within that email, I sent to everybody, even my competitors, a bid sheet that came from a supplier that was dated pre-bid, was dated prior to the bid, to show that I had received a bid and used a bid for the 2x6 deck. So, I mean, I understand the frustration, and I understand that everybody wants to do this above board. I would never accuse anyone of cheating on a bid or anything else without real evidence. The facts are clear, and I've tried to provide that information to the board properly, and it is a clarification. And our number has not changed, and I would have never sent the email other than I really thought I was just clarifying post-bid information, and I didn't understand or failed to understand that it would create a bunch of controversy. At the time, Manhattan was low by $100,000, and I was just trying to make sure that there were two thoughts in mind. One, the analysis that Joe put out, the $50,000 difference, okay, wouldn't apply if something had happened, because in fact we were supplying 2x6, even though we're lower, even with the 5/4 or 2x6 than Mr. Stokes' bid. And I was also, it was thought about today, like I said before, how do you, in this analysis, penalize someone for using 5/4 when it's allowed in the spec? Even if anyone in this bid was going to use 5/4, it would be hard to say, well, it's cheaper, therefore the other bidder may be supplying something better. That's kind of a strange place to be. But having stated all that, we're supplying 2x6, and I tried to supply the quote from our supplier that was dated prior to the bid to show that. But MCG's been doing this for 18 years, and we've never doctored, changed, or ever been accused of doing anything like that in the bid. It was an honest mistake on the questionnaire. There was some confusion because 5/4 board is being used for the handrail, top rail, 5/4 composite, and that's where the mistake was made. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Foster, I have a question for you then. The email that was sent out to these contractors to specify the material was done after the bid opening?
That to Chris, Joe?
Mr. Foster, I think.
Mr. Foster?
Yeah, can you,
This
go
email
ahead.
was out for the material specifications after the bid was opened?
Yes, and it was directed out of my email for clarification for additional information on their bids.
Okay.
And the reason, just to give some background, the reasoning of that is because you already have a bridge out there with tan deck material. But to allow for non-sole source material, I opened it up to an equal. And that's why I wanted clarification, because as the board, if aesthetics are important, to some people, I don't know, I wanted to give you guys options on it.
Okay, but the bottom line then is, and from my opinion, this is not a modification to the bid. The bids were already in, they were already open, and this was something that you requested is additional clarification after the fact.
Correct.
Hey, Joe, Mr. Foster, but in the memo you sent to us, you explicitly called it out on two of them as 5/4 inch. So for some reason, you thought that bid was for 5/4, correct?
That was the information that was provided by Manhattan Bridge, Marine Contracting Group, and Stokes Marine when I asked those questions.
Because Stokes Marine had 2 inch and the other you thought had 5/4, correct?
Correct. All of them made the minimum specifications for the boardwalk design.
Well, Mr. Foster, I was going to ask this maybe at a later date, but if you look at your memo on page 2, paragraph 2, there's conversation about 5/4 and 2-inch material and centers on joists. And I would ask you to take a look at that and see if you can clarify it, because it was very confusing to me. And maybe you want to do that at a later date, but the fact is, both these companies are quoting 2x6 material, and one just took a little time to see that they had put something wrong in a letter or a memo to you and re-clarified to correct that statement, is how I'm looking at this as simplistically as I can.
Are there other questions or comments from other members of the committee? Tony?
And Mr. Measy,
Yes.
under Article 1.4 in the bid documents, section 00300, which I included, the board reserves the right to waive minor variations to specifications, informalities, irregularities, and technicalities. So you can make, if you wish to, you can make a recommendation to the board to waive any, if you find there's even a variation, et cetera, to waive that, and then you can proceed to review, make recommendations on the 2 remaining bidders, if you so choose to do that.
Do we need a motion to waive that requirement?
Can I
yes.
make first, Phil? I don't even look at this as a change to the bid. This was something that happened after the fact, and it was just a clarification requested by our engineer to clarify what material was included. So it didn't affect.
Yeah, the committee can make that recommendation also to the board, that this email was not any variation in specs or anything in the bid. The committee can make that recommendation to the board.
I would make a motion that this is just a clarification, and it was a clerical mistake made after the fact and not part of the bidding process. And I would.
Motion. Are they take public comment?
Do we need?
Is that a motion, Joe?
This is can help us.
Yeah.
Joe, is that a motion?
Yeah, I'm making a motion that we accept this as just after the bidding process, not as part of the bidding process. The clarification.
Do I have a
motion that we
second?
Clarification to information.
I'll second.
that.
Okay, Teresa seconds it. Further discussion? Again, any comments on this? If not, I'll call the motion. Chris, would you?
Here to vote, Mr. Measy,
Yes.
Mr. Grega,
Yes.
Mr. DePonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Schofield,
Yes.
Mr. Sikorsky,
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Zanter.
No.
Motion passes. One.
Okay. All right, now we get to the easy part. And that is looking at the bids themselves, and the companies that have bid. Miss Joe, do you want to give us your take on this?
And before that, Mr. Measy,
Yes,
at 3:15, I need to hop off
I
for
know
a
that.
Zoom meeting with our county commissioner. So Zach will still be on there, and I can get back on around 4 o'clock if y'all are still there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you had told us that, Tony. Thank you. I was
Thank you.
mindful of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Joe, do you want to give us your thinking on this thing?
Chairman Measy, are you directing it towards me, that question,
Yeah.
Joe?
Mr. Foster, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, not a problem. What specifically, I want to answer your question of, I outlined the information on the memo. What specifically are you looking for me to answer?
Just give us again the take that you had in your memo that we should all be aware of, but if you would give us
Okay.
where you're coming from.
Okay. So basically you have two marine qualified contractors. You know, I've done business with both of them. Both of them are very good. The one contractor has worked on the bridges that are located on the property, and that's Stokes Marine. The other one has not. And so when I'm just looking at this of possible change orders, the Stokes Marine has knows the local conditions because they have worked there before. Now, with that being said, Marine Contracting Group is a very responsible contractor. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. You have two good contractors here. One has worked at the location there, knows all the stuff. You have the other one that would be new to the area. The other thing is the Marine Contractor Group is specifying a different brand of decking versus Stokes Marine is using the same decking that was used on the bridges. So there can be slight color differential in the decking itself.
Hey, Joe, is there any difference on price between those two different type of decking, or would you say they were the same price?
They're very comparable when you start going from the 2-inch, looking at 2-inch and 2-inch nominal.
2-inch, yes.
And how about quality, Joe, of either? About
Very
the same?
similar. Yeah, very similar.
Okay.
Did you provide any specifications regarding the glass content versus fillers, et cetera?
I did not.
Well, how do you look at the specs right now? Obviously, if you're saying they're
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
similar in the filler content versus the et cetera,
I came up, and that's the memo, and I forget who asked about the memo of the joist spacing and things. I go off of the design literature that's provided by the manufacturer. And the 5/4 on the tan deck, the recommendation of the manufacturer is to go 16-inch on center. The wear deck recommends you can go up to 24-inch on center. That's why the wear deck was included, the 5/4 was included as an equal. So I'm going off to boil that down, I'm going to look at the design literature that they're giving me.
Further questions?
This is Brian with Marine Contracting. Could I make one comment about fillers and composites?
Yes, go ahead.
These are synthetic, both tan deck and wear deck. It's on my understanding, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, are synthetic, 100% synthetic decking, right? Yes. And the wear deck, the difference is the wear deck has a fiberglass mat. A fiberglass mat.
Both top and bottom for structural reinforcement.
Fiberglass mat for structural reinforcement, which makes it, that's what allows the 5/4, if that was being used and it's not, that's what allows the 5/4 to go to the 2 foot, for the 2 foot span. but so there are no fillers and stuff. This is both these guys are synthetic composite decking. I mean,
There's a
I
bid
think that I can show you that in the literature, and Joe probably can confirm.
Mr. Measy, I would
Yes.
ask the gentleman that just spoke to identify the person in the background that was also mentioning various specifications.
That's my estimator, Ryan Madolo. So you have Brian Madolo, who is the owner and principal of MCG, and my nephew, Ryan Madolo, who's my estimator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for Joe Foster.
Go ahead.
Joe, aside from the, I guess, manufacturer of the decking and the price of the bid, do you see any other major differences between the two bids?
Other than you have one contract that has worked on the property versus the other, no, I don't see any other differences in the bid.
Were there
And
any,
outside what you just mentioned, I'll just say that.
were there any time specifications in the bidding process?
I think I stated that. I think they were similar, but I think I stated a part of my memo. I'd have to go back and look through that. Marine Contracting Group put it as time frame was 150 days. Stokes Marine was 119 days.
Right.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
One last question goes to you, Mr. Foster. You had mentioned in your letter that it was approximately $50,000 difference between the different material, the 5/4 and the 2-inch. And then Brian Madola on this call said that they were about the same price. It seems like those are two different answers to the same question.
The 2-inch, what I believe Mr. Medillo said was on the 2-inch nominal 2-inch by 6-inch board is similar price to the tan deck. The 5/4 inch wear deck is about a $50,000 savings, which still meets the minimum specifications for the boardwalks.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I have one more question, and I don't know who I should ask about this, but when we had Stokes do the bridge work, did they complete the job under budget and on time? That was Scott who answered yes.
Scott, do you have can you address that? Scott, are you with us? Chris, can you address that?
Scott Sharnow, property manager of Pelican Preserve. The question is on the bridge project, was the bridge project completed on time and on budget? And that answer was yes.
Mr. Chair, I can also.
Go ahead, Chris.
Bob Geppert, resident of Pelican Preserve.
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, the question was asked, the timing between the two. And I believe the answer that I heard was 150 days versus 119. And I would like the board to look at the combination of the 150 days plus 30 after the procedure work was started versus 119 and 14 days. So the real difference between the two bids, in my mind, I'm reading these documents, is really 133 days versus 180 days. Just a comment that I saw on the paperwork.
Thank you. Any further comments? Can we go? I guess the next thing is a motion to recommend to the board that they one of these two contractors.
This is Brent with Stokes Marine. Can I make one more comment on the decking before you make your vote?
Please do.
I just want to put some clarity out there. Number one, we're happy to use either decking. We understand Joe's position. We understand that they're both called out on the specs. I work with both these deckings on a daily basis. They've used plenty of them. They're both a good product, and I'm happy to use either one, regardless is what is determined. So I want to put that out there. Number one. Number two, if we go with 5/4 or 2x or tan deck or wear deck, brand wise or size wise, we're more than happy to work with either one of them. And then just one more little sales plug, if I can. You know, when we did our bid was based off of actuals from what it took on the bridges. And if you look at the work scope and the design of the bridges compared to the Boardwalk, they're practically the exact same design. They're very minimal differences between the two. So we know exactly how long it takes. We know exactly what the material counts are. We've had a dry run, if you will. This is almost a round two or a phase two for us. So I'm very confident in the time frame we've established. I'm very confident in the price we've established. Staging area, lay of the land, you know, you name it. So I feel real confident in our bid. Thank you for the opportunity.
Brent, a question for you. You've been out there, you know, that boardwalk, there's a lot of golf carts that go through there. Does that make a difference on the 5/4 versus 2-inch because of, I mean, there's a lot of golf cart traffic through that boardwalk?
Sure. You know, at the end of the day, the 2-inch board is a thicker board. That's a question that truthfully Joe should answer. It all comes down to the loading that the manufacturers are gonna stand by on their product with the different centers based on the different thickness. And if the weight of those golf carts and those pedestrians on that bridge is less than that design load, then in theory you're fine with either one of them. But it doesn't change the fact that you know, the 2x board is a thicker board and is going to have a better load rating on the same centers as the 5/4 board. One board's thicker. If you put the framing at the same gap distance between them, and you put 2x on one and 1x on the other, obviously the 2x is going to be you know, less deflection and have a higher load. But you know, at the end of the day, Joe specs do say that either would work. And you know, for the record, if the decision ends up being going to 5/4, you know, our price is going to be significantly less because I do have 2x in there, and there's a minimum of a $50,000 price difference there. But I'll leave that up to you guys and Joe on what board you put out there. But I want the record to show that, you know, our price is with the 2x. It was with the 2x from the word go. I did get quotes on both of them, so showing a quote from before the bid was done doesn't mean that's what I had in my quote. And I'm happy to use either one. And if 5/4 is the decision, then you're going to have at least a $50,000 savings. And whether it's tear deck or tan deck or wear deck, I'm fine either way.
I have a question for Stokes Marine. As they worked on our bridges and their quote is higher, do they see something that maybe other contractors don't see in the required work to be done? Are you guys maybe preparing for something more than what we can see on paper?
I don't have any way of answering that with certainty. I mean, look, Marine Contracting Group's a good outfit. You know, I presume that they, I naturally presume that they're qualified to put a bid together for this. But I also know, as owning this business for 20 years, that when we put estimates together, they're just that, they're estimates. And albeit we're in this industry, we ought to know what the time is going to take. But anybody here that's done anything construction in their life knows that construction doesn't always go as planned. So again, I would reiterate the fact that my bid is based off of actuals, not an estimate from the bridges. And the staging areas were the same. The work scope is the same. The proximities are a short walk apart from each other. They're very, 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 very similar. So I feel very, very confident in our bid, having been there, done that already.
I have a question regarding your staging areas. Are they the same? Are you going to be staging anything inside the boardwalk? I mean, inside the preserve?
Well, per the bid documents, the staging areas were outlined for where the suitable staging areas are.
Okay. Which they were, and they're very strict. So you're very comfortable with that.
I am. Naturally, the more staging, the merrier. You know, you can never really have too much, but we put together some plans for how we can stage some material on the boardwalk as different phases are torn out. in the sequence that we do our tear out and the sequence that we bring in our new material was part of our assertion of how long it would take us to do the work, and we factored all that into our bid accordingly.
John, just as an aside, one of the things that we may be able to do is Sienna had refused to allow us to use some of their property as a staging area, but we think we may be changing their mind, but that would benefit either contractor and would speed up the process quite a bit. In fact, Bob Geppert may want to comment on that. Guess not.
I had to get up to the microphone. Bob Geppert again from Pelican. I expect that the approval is going to come as soon as we ask for it, to go with the original position behind the Sienna 1 building. And when all the conditions are the same as it was the last time, we just leave it that way when it's done. I have had conversation with the board. I forwarded those memos to Scott, and I think that's going to happen.
Now,
Okay.
mean that the timetable for finishing
It can only improve things
it should improve it.
by about 3 weeks to a month.
On both.
On both,
Regardless of which contractor.
regardless of contractor, it would benefit either contractor.
It benefits, it's, contractor neutral.
All right, clarify one thing. Which contractor did you say at this point gave a bid that was almost 2 months shorter in time?
The documents here. Marine,
Marine.
Stokes
180
was the
days.
shorter one, Stokes.
Okay.
And Stokes was 133 days.
So when will we get started on this construction?
Right.
Once the board approves it, I assume.
Well, okay, that's a nebulous answer. Thank you.
Scott should be able to address that.
The special meeting was so it could be presented to the board at their next meeting.
Yeah, we meet this Thursday.
What I'm trying to figure out is if that time period extends back into season, or if it just
Forget about
extends
season.
through.
This is go from the day you get approved.
Okay, so it would end during the slower period in the preserve anyhow. So I'm not sure if time is a real impact. And 2 months is 2 months, but
Yeah,
if we don't have a lot of residency, then we're not hurting a lot of people if we're slower. Bob, we'll put you into consideration.
This is Ron. Can I make a comment or two?
Yeah.
Yes.
Bill? Okay, thanks. Listen, I'm sitting here in my own mind trying to go through pros and cons of either of the two contractors. And quite frankly, what I've got, and I'm looking for the rest of you guys to modify what I'm about to say if you think it's necessary. Marine is going to be about $90,000 to $100,000 cheaper. Stokes is going to be a month and a half, perhaps, quicker. And they do know the area, obviously, because they did the bridges. And yeah, that has some benefits in the sense of knowing the area and what issues that might come to play here. To my mind, that's basically the difference between the two. And I'm looking to see if anybody else in the group has anything to add to that.
Well, I'll say the time, a little more time isn't bothering me for the savings that we're getting.
Okay.
This is Doug. I still do not like the 50K change, the change in the materials and clarification after the note from Joe. I just throw that out there.
I don't think there was any pricing.
I think we've been over that. I would suggest that Ron's analysis is pretty good, and let's not plow the same ground.
This is Joe Foster. To add on to Ron's analysis, and thank you, you would be using, Stokes Marine would be using the same deck board as on the bridges as on the board, or as on the boardwalk. Apologies there.
So it would give you some consistency in color and feel of the deck boarding. Is that right?
That is correct.
This is Brian with Marine Contracting. Can I address this issue?
Yes, go ahead.
The Stokes company's been telling you folks that they'll use any decking, any width, anything that they want. I'm totally open to the same. So this notion that I have to use wear deck, if you guys want me to use can deck in the same color, I can absolutely do that. I'm doing several projects very close. I understand there's advantage in that he's worked with you before, and that's great. And I understand the advantages to that. But I just want to make it clear that in the area of Fort Myers, Lee County, Collier County, Charlotte County, we do lots and lots and lots of projects and use the same suppliers in Fort Myers and everywhere else. So I just wanted to make that clear. But if you guys want can deck, we can absolutely do that. And in our proposal, we showed you some things that we saw on the bridges that we would do differently. Not in the spec, not what Joe said. But I think that should be taken into consideration. But for me, too, I just want one last point. I just want to make sure everybody understands there is no 50. Our price is the price that we gave, and I know we don't want to plow that ground, but the price we gave is the price that we submitted, and it's 2x6, and it can be tan deck or wear deck, whatever you wish. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
With all due respects to both Stokes and Marine, I'm discounting any comment that says they're willing to change their proposals. So I'm not considering that at all in my personal evaluation.
I'm assuming now that we can move forward with somebody making a motion for one or the other of these.
I would make a motion that we accept the Marine Contracting Group's bid at $994,690 and encourage them to go faster.
And just a piece of clarification, it should be a motion to recommend approval to the board.
Yeah, to recommend to the board. Right, thanks.
Yes, recommend to the board.
Okay. Do we have a second of that?
I'll second
it.
Okay, Teresa seconded it. Okay, further discussion? If not, okay, so the motion is to select Marine Contracting Group. Chris, would you poll the board, please?
Yes. Mr. Measy,
Yes.
Mr. Grega,
Yes.
Mr. DePonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Schofield,
Yes.
Mr. Sikorsky,
Yes.
Mr. Zanter.
I guess I'm the lone no again.
Okay. Motion passes 6-1 to recommend to the Board of Supervisors, Marine Contracting, Inc.
Okay. Any further discussion? I think we have done what we were supposed to do at this meeting. We thank all the bidders. Stokes, we thank you. You did an excellent job on our bridges. You just didn't get this one. We're looking forward to working with Marine Contracting Group on this very, very important project and very big project for us. Are there any further comments? If not, our next regular meeting will be on February 11th at 2 o'clock. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
With no, assuming there are no objections, if there are no objections, I will call that unanimous and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
3:29 p.m.